What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Windy City Gridiron Radio. This is episode 5. Jack Silverstein joins me again. We're going to talk post-Ditka. He's been working on this series of the best Bears post-Mike Ditka after he was let go from the Bears in 1992. And we're going to preview, and after that, we'll preview some Bears training camp or get set for Bourbonnais by looking at the offense. This is a podcast on Windy City Gridiron of SB Nation, and your host, Robert Ziblinski, at your service. Jack, how are you?
Yeah, I'm great, Robert. How are you?
It's a little hot. I'm not doing well in the summer, but I'm eager to dive into this and get really nostalgic. So
good. Well, yeah, I started reading. I think it was a New York Times story called "The Uninhabitable Earth," which believes that Miami and Bangladesh will not exist by, I think, the year 2100. And then a climate scientist came out and wrote a counter article saying that, no, this article was way overdone. Earth will be habitable. I can never say that word. We'll be able to live on Earth. And you know, what are you to believe? I think we should recycle a little bit more. But in the meantime, let's talk Bears.
Let's talk Bears before the end of the world. That's a good motto. All right, so Jack,
that should be our new tagline. Let's talk Bears before the end of the world. Forget about who we are, who you thought we were since 2005. Shit's going down. Bear down.
Let's talk Bears before the end of the world. All right.
Bear down before the end of the world.
Bear down before the end of the world. Jack has been working on this post-Ditka series for quite a while now, painstakingly, meticulously, polling the WCG staff, polling social media, Twitter, picking out guys that he thought fit the mold for each and every position, every coaching position on the Bears.
All of it.
Literally all of it.
Whole shebang.
And he's set the roster according to the consensus he received from us, from his own opinion, and from all of you loyal listeners and readers of WCG. So today we're gonna go through all of it and debate the merits of it, and just
we're gonna debut. Yeah, we're gonna debut the roster. I haven't written the full roster story yet, and I interviewed Jason McKee, our old fullback, and that story is gonna run on Windy City Gridiron on Wednesday, July 12th. We're recording right now on July 10th. So maybe the story will be up by then. But that will be on Wednesday the 12th. And then the following week, we will debut the written version with a little special twist that we're not going to reveal here, but it'll be cool. In the meantime, though, this will be the first time that people will get to see the full roster. And the voting on this has been, I think, pretty involved and passionate. So,
Jack, you did this 7 or 8 years ago, right? You've done
yes.
like a previous version. Okay, so this is an updated version. Obviously, some things have changed since then. Probably.
Well, so here's the biggest deal. So I did this on my old website. It's still my website, but I did this on my website in maybe from like late August through late October of 2009. So when I was starting this, Jay Cutler had not taken a snap for the Bears. Matt Forte had just completed his rookie season. So Jay wasn't on this roster. I decided that Forte, having only had one season, he wasn't on this roster. When we did, I had a group of friends who all were like the staff, basically, who did all the voting. And, we were all debating for quarterback. Kramer, was it Grossman? Was it Orton? Was it Orton maybe? Was it, Harbaugh only had one season in the post-Ditka era? Well, was it Harbaugh? All this. And was it Jim Miller or Shane Matthews? And a Packers fan friend of mine whose name in my phone is Packers Suck, so that every time he calls, it just pops up. I've got Packers Suck, and then I've got another Packers fan friend who was the only Packers fan who was at my house for Super Bowl 31, which was Green Bay, New England. That was the Desmond Howard Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
My parents had a Super Bowl party upstairs. Me and my friends were in the basement. This dude, shout out to Tony, was the only person in the whole house rooting for the Packers. And so his name in my phone is SBXXX1, Super Bowl 31 sucked. So anyways, this is Packers Sucks. And he told me that as a Packers fan, he was voting for Jay Cutler, even though Jay Cutler had never taken a snap for the Bears. And his reason was that this was the first Bears quarterback who at all made him concerned about playing the Bears. So 8 years later, Jay Cutler owns every record basically in the Bears, every passing record in the Bears record book, and he's our starting quarterback. That was a pretty easy one, but there were some debates a little bit further down the roster. So why don't you kick it off? You tell me what you want to know, and we'll roll through.
Okay, so we basically just did quarterback. I mean, Jay Cutler didn't roll through the Packers or anything, but he is the statistical best Bears quarterback of all time. I think most would say naturally talented as well. Dan Hampton the other day said that the Bears would have won 4 Super Bowls, that his 80s Bears would have won 4 Super Bowls with Cutler at quarterback. I think that, again, that's probably not indisputable.
You know what I'm starting to think about that stuff, though? Because I understand on the one hand that if we'd had more positional stability through that run, that maybe we would have won some more titles. And obviously the decision to start Doug Flutie in the 86 playoffs, that was, obviously that backfired. But I wonder if, the Bears were this great defensive team, right? Obviously the strength was the D. And I wonder if all this talk about what the quarterback position should have been is actually kind of a cop-out by these defensive stars who just didn't get it done in 86, 87, 88. And then, 89 was a bad year, but then 90 and 91. And we don't really talk about that. We really just frame it based on, like, who should the quarterback have been? What would we have done with a different QB? What would we have done if Buddy Ryan stayed? Blah, 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 blah. Maybe this is just a team that just didn't – I'm not trying to sidetrack us here, but maybe it's just a team that just didn't get it done.
I mean – they had a comparison. It was an interesting comparison for me the other day. I think we actually talked about this on Twitter, you and I, to the 2013 Seattle Seahawks. A lot of swagger.
Yeah.
Very physical team, but they're they not really a dynasty. They just they had won a championship, were the dominant team, and then started to fall off. What if the Bears were just that team? I mean, that's
right.
perfectly fine, and I agree with that. I mean, the 80s. You had the dynasty of the Niners in there. The Redskins won 3 Super Bowls. The Giants won 1 there. I mean, there was a lot. That's also discounting the other great teams that the Bears couldn't beat. It's like everyone always frames it. Oh wow, how did the '85 Bears only get 1 Super Bowl title? I mean, it's all laid out on a platter for us. But
it happens. Yeah,
it happens. Okay, so let's kind of go. I wanted to go offense, defense here. I mean, we're gonna go through every position.
Yeah, go for it.
So we did quarterback.
Well, what about the backups? Because it is
backups. You want to talk Eric Kramer? Okay, Eric Kramer, Rex Grossman. So Eric Kramer had a great 1995 season. I was 1 year old, and then Rex Grossman. I mean, some people will say in spite of they made Super Bowl 41 in spite of him, but I mean, he played well at times. He played well enough for a team that was loaded everywhere else. I'd probably take Grossman over Kramer. I know Kramer had a good
as the backup.
As the backup. That speaks volumes as to how
really
little depth the Bears would have there. But
because Lester doesn't even want Grossman as the number 3 man. Lester disputed that in an email to me, and I mean to us, and said that when I released the roster to you guys for your inspection, he was like, Kramer, yes, and he said absolutely not on Rex as the number 3, and he would have taken McCown over him, but I was like, it's McCown played like 8 games. Like
McCown played 8 games, and Grossman, even while there was good Rex, bad Rex. I mean, Rex's best season, if we can call it a best season, the Bears went to the Super Bowl. So to me, that is second best.
Yes, I agree.
Still really far behind Cutler, but
also agree.
Back up. Okay, so now defensive end.
Yeah,
this probably wasn't really debatable either. Julius Peppers wasn't a homegrown guy, but he was a big free agent get in 2010 by Lovie Smith. He's probably going to be a first ballot or second ballot Hall of Famer. In my mind, I've never really seen a guy that freakish, just like 6'8", probably I think 300 pounds. I think he's 300 pounds. Just dominate the way he did when he first got here with the Bears. He was already declining technically, 32 years old. that's, to me, he's head and shoulders above the rest of his competition here. I'd probably take, so I see that Alex Brown's a starter. I'd probably take Adewale Ogunleye over Brown, actually.
Okay.
I think Adewale Ogunleye, this was before I followed or wrote about the Bears or covered the Bears, but didn't he have a 13.5 sack season in 2005 or 2004 when he first came here? Something like that? Like
no.
a really high sack.
He had a really high sack total his final year with the Dolphins.
Okay.
Yeah, and so then we traded Marty Booker for him in the 2004 preseason, but he was 15 sacks in 03, and then we got him. He was 5 sacks in 04 in 12 games, and then 10 sacks in 05, and then never hit 10 again. But I don't want to diminish what he did, because in 2007, for example, he had 6 forced fumbles. He should have been in the Pro Bowl in 2007, no doubt. Some of these guys, when I was doing this roster, I look at it as starters and then other players who are definitely on the roster and then guys who are probably on the roster. And whether you think Alex Brown or Ogunleye is the starter, I think they're both definitely on the roster.
Yeah, they're both definitely on the roster. It's just deciding, who gets the majority of the snaps in this hypothetical game or hypothetical, post-Ditka team. I just think Ogunleye is the better pass rusher, so that's more valuable to me. Brown's more of a he was a good player, but he wasn't as special. He didn't have that same dynamic ability.
Yeah, Ogunleye was considered a specialist, a pass rushing specialist. Because his Pro Bowl year in Miami, he had those 15 sacks. Alex Brown was never really a specialist, even though he came out of Florida as the school's all-time leader in sacks. But he was such a great all-around player. I mean,
yeah, he
get the sacks, he get the strips, get the interceptions, stop the run, and he didn't miss a game after his first game in the NFL where he was inactive. And after that, he didn't miss a game the rest of his career. Yeah, that's right.
I'll say on Pepper's note that the 2010 season, so his first season with the Bears, he was probably more dominant than Urlacher's Defensive Player of the Year, 2005 or 2006. To me, I hadn't seen a player change the game or change the Bears defense in that kind of facet as much as and Urlacher. He was the reason that they contended again. As much as Cutler stabilized the quarterback position, he made the Bears defense great again because they fell off a little bit after Super Bowl for 3 or 4 years. He brought them back to that level.
I agree. I agree with that, but he wasn't better. Pep wasn't better. No disrespect to Pep, who's the man. He wasn't better in 2010 than Brian was in 2005. He wasn't. Brian was all over the field. But we can wait. And actually let's get back to the running back. I think we agree Forte, even though as much as I love Thomas Jones, it's just a years thing.
Forte is the second best Bears running back ever.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, based on production. I mean, okay, so if Gale Sayers hadn't torn his ACL so many times, he'd probably be the best Bears running back. He'd probably be above Walter Payton, but that's not what happened. So Forte is, I believe, second in most relevant statistics. He's and any statistic he's behind, it's only behind Walter. He's probably their best receiver. You could easily have him catch 50 passes, run for 1,000 yards. The offense ran through him his entire career here while surrounded by almost nothing besides Jay. I mean, he was special. He was more underrated than even you could be underrated. Like, he didn't deserve it. He didn't get enough credit that he deserved, to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought what was really impressive about Matt was obviously his versatility, the fact that he wasn't just a great receiver out of the backfield. He was a great receiver lined up wide. So he had that great game against Detroit in 2010 where he had the 89-yard touchdown on a screen pass. But then he also had that jump ball. This was the Calvin Johnson catch-no-catch game. So the way that the Bears went ahead was jump ball to Forte in the left corner of, I don't remember if it was the south or north end zone, but it was on that side of the field. And those are two totally different kinds of plays for a running back to make. You know, one is you're out in space, jumping up and making a play. The other is you're catching a screen pass and then you just have to turn on the jets. I love the development that he had in 2011. I felt like he added this new center of gravity and balance where suddenly he could take a hit and bounce off and take, 2 steps to regain his balance, and then boom, he was off and running again. And that was obviously the year where he went down and missed the last 4 games of the season. And if you remove that, I mean, he finished with 997 yards rushing that season. Assuming that he does not get injured, that's another 1,000-yard season. That would have been 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons from 2010 to 2014. And he's never been below 800, even last year with the Jets. So, yeah, I love Forte. Obviously, you know how I feel about Thomas Jones. This is a year's thing. So Jones is a lock, though, at running back. And for me, blocking for those guys, also a lock is Jason McKee. Again, interview coming July 12th with J-Mac.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears have really – I couldn't speak enough to this because the Bears have kind of phased out using the fullback effectively after McKee. So it's not by default because he was also very good, but because also I have no one else to reference because of how fullback has gone in the NFL. But McKee, I mean, back when the Bears ran that traditional power offense, who would you want leading the hole for Thomas Jones to burst through, to break through arm tackles? I mean, they had, as much as Rex Grossman struggled, as much as Kyle Orton was a game manager, McKee and Jones were the dynamic duo in the backfield working together. So, I mean, there's not really much disputable on that.
No, definitely not. All right, so this is where I think it's a little bit interesting, is wide receiver. So there was, this was my feeling. It was the feeling of the staff, you guys, and it was the feeling of the voters, of the readers, the listeners, was that the 2 starting wide receivers would be Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey. And when I did this in 2009, the starters were Booker and Conway, and Marcus Robinson was the 3rd stringer, although the number 3 guy, although I thought Robinson should be the starter. That's my guy. But we've got Brandon and Alshon, and you've seen what I've written out here. Who would be I guess these are my questions. Number 1, who would be your number 3 and number 4 receiver? And number 2, how many receivers would you want on this hypothetical roster?
So you're saying I could cater it more to tight ends or something if I wanted to?
If you wanted to, or you could say, I want 6 receivers or I want 5 receivers because I want more special team specialists, or I want another linebacker here or whatever. So Brandon and Alshon are the starters. Who are your 3 and your 4? And how many receivers do you want, and who are they?
Okay, so my 3 and 4 would be, I can't really disagree with how the vote went. Marty Booker had back-to-back 100 reception seasons in 2001 and 2002, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he didn't get there in 2002, but he had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons.
1,000-yard season, that's what it was.
Huge deal.
Marcus Robinson, again, he was a guy that I looked back on that probably should have produced more if things had gone his way. So he'd be number 4. I'd take Rasheed Davis over Bernard Berrien.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if I would carry Berrien on the roster necessarily. Rasheed Davis was a valuable special teamer. Rasheed Davis, he wasn't necessarily the greatest slot receiver, 4th receiver, but he made some big catches. I mean, he had that big catch in the Seattle game in 2006 playoffs to set the Bears up for a field goal. And then after that, I mean, I'm probably only carrying 5 receivers on this team. I might take on as much as to draw the ire of everyone listening. The 5th receiver would probably be Joshua Bellamy for another special teams. I know this isn't how a competitive team is built. This isn't how a competitive team is built, but I'm going to take on more tight ends here. So when we get to that,
well, we've got 3 tight ends. Are you going with a 4th?
I'm going to say so.
All right, hold on. I can't even get into that yet because I have a question for you. So you've got Brandon, Alshon, Marty, Marcus, and then Rasheed as your 5th man. So here's my question, because this was something that I was looking at. First of all, I think I want to keep Devin as a returner only.
Devin will be a returner only.
All right,
he doesn't have a spot in offense to me.
All right, even though I think that his production as a wide receiver is actually pretty underrated. He gets a bad rap as a wide receiver, and that's a conversation for another day. Hit me on Twitter at ReedJack. I will defend that to the death. All right, here's the question. We've got some speed receiver specialists, and as much as those four guys that we named, Marshall, Jeffrey, Booker, Robinson, are game breakers, they're not speed specialists, nor is Rasheed Davis. So do you want to add Bernard Berrien, Curtis Conway, or Johnny Knox as a number 6? Is the speed that they bring to the table worth more to you than adding another special teamer?
On that note, I will probably do Johnny Knox because if not for Johnny Knox's back injury, he'd probably still be playing with the Bears as a reliable deep threat. So, I mean, imagine him on this offense now, what they're effectively missing with whoever they're building around Mike Glenn and Mr. Trubisky. Imagine Johnny Knox in this offense. So his dimension probably works best this post-Ditka team. On that note, I actually wanted to ask a question about Marshall and Jeffrey.
Yeah.
So Brandon Marshall's 2012 season, which let me pull up here, was probably his best as a Bear.
Best Bears receiving season ever.
Over Alshon Jeffrey 2013.
Yes. 100%. 100%. And here's why. First of all, Alshon was dope, but Alshon didn't do anything that I hadn't seen before because Marcus Robinson had a very similar season in 1999. Before Brandon Marshall, Marcus Robinson had the Bears franchise record for receiving yards in a season. He was a guy who was going up and getting those jump balls. And kind of like Alshon in 2013, Marcus was doing it with whatever quarterback was back there because we played McNown, Miller, and Matthews pretty evenly in 1999. And Alshon, although we remember him in 2013 with Josh McCown, he was also catching passes from Jay Cutler. Alshon was amazing, and I didn't take nothing away from him. But Brandon, he had the down the field stuff. He had the third down catches. He had touchdowns, multiple TD games. He was blocking. Now, I know Alshon was killing it in 2013 with the end around, but you know who was blocking on those end arounds? B. Marsh. He changed the entire nature of the attitude of that offense. He impressed. So I was in the locker room that year, and I was asking guys at the beginning of the season, who are you most excited to see? Now, what you got to understand is that when you walk into an NFL locker room, these guys are all the biggest, strongest, fastest people who you've ever seen in your life. Adam Podlish was a high school running back and track star. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of perspective of what an NFL locker room is like. Adam Podlish, the punter, right? These guys were in awe of Brandon. They could not stop talking about his speed, his hands, his confidence, his size, his strength, the entire package. And the numbers that he put up in 2012, they rewrote just about every record in the Bears book. Coming out of 2011, the problem was, all right, who is Jay going to pass to? You know, we had Devin, we had Johnny. Obviously, that's Knox's last season, but Knox, even as a number one receiver in 2010, he only had 970 yards. So you had Knox and Hester and Earl Bennett. That was the year with Roy Williams. Brandon Marshall came in and completely changed the entire nature of that offense. What Brandon did that season is beyond anything that we've ever seen. And remember, if you want to talk about Alshon, Marcus Robinson, Marty Booker, Brandon Marshall wasn't just a Pro Bowler. He was first team All-Pro. He was far and away one of the top 2 receivers in the NFL that season, along with Calvin Johnson. So no. It's not even a debate. There's no debate. Brandon Marshall, hands down number 1, and Alshon Jeffrey, hands down number 2. They each have those spots locked, but Alshon's not touching Brandon.
Jack stated his case well. Let's jump back to the defense. Tommy Harris.
Going back to D. All right, yeah.
Tommy Harris, Ted Washington.
And then Keith Traylor.
I can't really dispute those first 3. However, I'll note that Israel Adonijah, also, he wasn't necessarily a superstar, but as a role player, especially in the late Lovey years, you can't knock what he brought to the table as an effective third defensive end. With in fact, he wasn't he the starter with
Yeah.
Julius? He
Yeah.
was the starter with Julius, so he wasn't that bad next to Julius.
Not only was he the starter next to Julius in 2010, the playoff year, but they both had 8 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
So he came in and he'd been inside. They moved him outside, and he played brilliantly. I mean, Izzy Adonijay is such a great all-around player for an exercise like this, for a roster like this. He can play inside or outside. He can contribute on special teams. He can block field goals and extra points. And he was blocking. He was out on the field. He was blocking on Devin's Super Bowl touchdown. So to me, Izzy's got the total package. When I first did this in 2009, I had Tommy Harris as the starting D tackle. And it was a 4-3, and we didn't get into, I didn't really break it down into like if he beat the 3 technique, but he's going to play where he's going to play. But it was Tommy Harris. And then my other defensive tackle, because I was really valuing years, was Jim Flanagan. For folks who don't remember, Jim Flanagan was a local product. He came out of Notre Dame. His father played for the Packers. He came to the Bears. He was one of the starters on that surprise 1994 defensive line, the team that went to the playoffs, upset Minnesota on the road. And then we signed a guy named Mike Wells from the Colts. And Flanagan and Wells were these two like smaller, quicker defensive tackles. And then we replaced them going into 2001 with Washington and Traylor. It was a total switch move in the terms of what we had up front. So originally I had Flanagan. I asked Pat Manley in 2012 when I was looking around the locker room and noticing that a lot of guys in that locker room were the best player who Manley had ever played with at their respective positions, which was a big deal because he'd been on the team since '98. And I started then asking him, all right, well, who's the best player you've played with at other positions? At the same positions, but the second best player. And he said that Ted Washington, after Julius Peppers, was the second best defensive lineman who he'd played with. And he just identified and lauded Washington for obviously his size, but really for his quickness and agility. And, both Washington and Traylor in consecutive seasons left and went to the Patriots and started on Super Bowl championship teams in New England, and Washington in 2003, Traylor in 2004. So they were more than just big dudes. I mean, they were quick off the ball. Obviously they could, take up a lot of space that was very valuable for Brian and at the time, Rosie Colvin and Warwick Holdman. We're going to get to those guys in a bit. But yeah, I've got Tommy Harris as my starting D-tack. I've got Ted Washington lined up next to him, and that gives you a defensive line of Peppers, Brown, Harris, and Washington. Certainly not to sneeze at.
A lot of beef. You mentioned we'll get into Rosie Colvin, who are you jumping to? Who are you jumping to here?
Let's stay defense right now. And we've got Brian. Okay. We've got Brian at middle linebacker, obviously, and this hypothetical team plays a 4-3. So we've got Brian at middle, and then we've got on the outsides, we've got Lance and Rosie Colvin. And, it looked like in 2001, it really looked like Urlacher, Colvin, and Warwick Holdman, were going to be the Bears linebackers for the next 10 years. Obviously, it didn't play out that way. We did get one season in 2003 where it was Urlacher, Briggs, and Holdman, which was neat. Obviously, Urlacher is your middle linebacker. Obviously, Briggs is there. But Rosie Colvin really, really showed out in 2001 and 2002. And Colvin has an interesting place in NFL history, or recent NFL history. Rosie Colvin was the first big free agent to sign with the Patriots that really kicked off their dynasty. Because remember, they won in 2001. People thought maybe it was flukish. They fell back to earth at 9-7 in 2002. 2003 is really the year that the Patriots dynasty begins. And Colvin was the first big free agent who they signed. And I remember it was reported at the time that one thing that impressed Rosie was they took him out to dinner, but they didn't do as fancy and as elaborate of a wine and dine. And Belichick basically just told him, like, are you here to play football and win games? Or are you here to, make money and, have accolades and women or whatever else? And Colvin really bought in. Obviously, there were other big signings and acquisitions for the Patriots in 2003, but he was the guy who really kicked it off. And you can obviously draw a straight line from Rosie Colvin signing with the Patriots in 2003 to them repeating that as a template of how they attract players, what kind of players they want to go after. You can draw it all the way to, this year. They're the defending Super Bowl champions. So shout out to Rosie Colvin.
I wanted to talk about you rostering, or at least that's how the vote went, putting Pernell McPhee as a depth guy on this. To me, he hasn't shown enough in 2 seasons. I mean, he hasn't been healthy enough to warrant a roster spot. And that note, I know I would vouch for Leonard Floyd, and he hasn't been healthy enough either.
Yeah,
I think it's very debatable. I know we're debating this, like the outer edges right now, but
right.
That stuck out to me.
All right, so Pernell McPhee, I have him listed, and when we post this final, we will post this spreadsheet. So listeners out there, you'll be able to see the spreadsheet that we are referencing. But Pernell McPhee, I have him listed right now as a probable, meaning that's still up for debate.
Right.
As far as the linebackers, I want Urlacher, Briggs, Colvin, Warwick Holdman, and I want Hunter Hillenmeyer because, again, like Adonijah, he's so versatile. Obviously, he started at the outside spot, but when Brian went down, when he broke his wrist week 1 of 2009, Hillenmeyer slid over and started at middle linebacker, played it the whole season, and he forced 3 fumbles that year on Adrian Peterson when Adrian Peterson was like really cooking. And then Hillenmeyer was on the field for most, if not all, while he was healthy, of Devin Hester's returns. I mean, we remember him pancaking dudes on the missed field goal return with the Giants. So now you've got 5 linebackers: Urlacher, Briggs, Colvin, Holdman, Hillenmeyer. And now it's a numbers game. Do we want to add a 6th linebacker? Where do we get the most value? Do we need, how many defensive linemen do we need? How many guys in the secondary do we need? How many receivers? How many offensive linemen? I just like what McPhee brings on the outside. I like what he brings in as a leader. I like that he was voted captain so early in his tenure with the Bears. And I can definitely be talked out of this, and I might be, because right now I've got Jerry Azuma on the outside looking in of this roster, and I do really want Azuma on this team. I think, again, he's pretty versatile. But when you look at other linebackers, if you need a 6th linebacker, I mean, maybe it's not McPhee, but it's like, who's it going to be? It's going to be Barry Minter or
Nick Roach.
Maybe, Nick Roach or Joe Kane or Vincent Smith, or my guy. Actually, one of my favorite Bears was Dante Jones, the middle linebacker, number 53. I don't know. It's just hard to say. So right now I've got McPhee. He's on the bubble, though. I'm not sure if I don't know if I'm going to stick with him.
Okay.
I can see that. I love McPhee. I love his game. But I'm just kind of exploring what are the needs here.
Okay. To probably one of the more now maligned ever made, and tight end, where the definitive starter, as maintained here in the spreadsheet, is Greg Olsen, who is lighting it up in Carolina instead of Chicago. Yeah. So I don't think we can Greg never really, I think he was good in Chicago, but the limits of the Mike Martz offense, the limits of the offensive line, and never having enough opportunities held him back a little bit. And now you've seen a Pro Bowler, first team, second team, all-pro type guy in Carolina, catching 80 passes every year. But regardless, his years in Chicago to me were still good enough to be better than Dez and Martellus Bennett.
Yeah,
That is.
So this gets into a debate of what you want at the tight end position, because Olsen is, I would say, the best pass catcher of the three. I would say Bennett is number 2, Clark number 3, but Clark is easily the best blocker of the three. And when we did the voting, the readers voted on the actual article. Greg Olsen had 52% of the vote. Dez had 35. Marty had 12. When we did the voting on Twitter, Dez had 40%, Olsen 36, Bennett 24. So anyway you cut it, though, I think all three of those guys are terrifically valuable, and I'd put all three of them on. Are you saying that you want a 4th tight end?
No, maybe
on this hypothetical roster, you're gonna get a 4th tight end, Robbie Z. Is that what you want to stake your professional legacy to?
My professional legacy on this post-Ditka 4th tight end. Maybe in time. No, I'm not going to do it, but maybe in time, Adam Shaheen. Just saying.
Oh my God! All right, moving on. Good God.
Okay.
I want everyone to know I only work with this guy. I do not endorse everything he says. All right.
Yes, you do. Corner or tackle, your choice.
Let's finish out the offense. Let's go offensive line. And this was pretty clear cut from the offensive tackles with Big Cat Williams and John Tate. The offensive guards, again, pretty clear cut from the voting, Kyle Long and Roberto Garza, probably because Reuben Brown, only played 3 seasons in Chicago, but they were masterful seasons. I have him as a no doubt about her on the roster. Olin Kreutz obviously is starting at center. So the questions at line, now you've got 6 guys: Tate, Big Cat, Long, Garza, Reuben Brown, and Kreutz. Who are your other tackles? Do you want a backup center? Do you need another guard? To me, you've got Garza. Garza is hypothetically your backup center. And for me, the other tackles who I want are Fred Miller and Andy Heck.
I can't dispute that. I mean, the Bears' offensive line hasn't been stable through most of the last decade, aside from 2006. So I can't really dispute that. I'll say, is Cody Whitehair's 1 season good enough to get on to this roster, or no?
No, but maybe after 2. I mean, part of the fun of the exercise also is just like taking an opportunity to appreciate the talent that we've had after Ditka, because everybody kind of looks at this franchise as being, the 85 Bears, and is like, well, we had talent after the 85 Bears. Like, we had talent after Mike Ditka. So for me, the fun of doing this roster is looking back at the other guys. Now, another guy who I considered at center would be Jerry Fontenot. Some other guys who I considered on the offensive line would be Blake Brockermeyer at tackle, Chris Valerio at guard. Valerio was a great player for the Bears in the late 90s and early 2000s out of University of Indiana, Pennsylvania. But ultimately, Big Cat and Tate, joined by Fred Miller and Andy Heck, Kyle Long, Garza, Reuben Brown, and Olin Kreutz.
That's a pretty good offensive line. That's a wall right there.
That's 8 offensive linemen. So, if we're looking at how are we going to match up with the hypothetical Packers team of the same, I always think Bears Packers. So if we were talking about a hypothetical Packers team of approximately the same era, then you have to defend Reggie White and probably old Julius Peppers, and maybe the KGB, and then Gilbert Brown and
Charles Martin.
What's that?
No, that's not post Ditka. That's not post Packers. Never mind.
Yeah. So this is like the hypothetical Packers era. And I don't know, maybe also like Gabe Wilkins or Santana Dotson or maybe BJ Raji. You got some guys who pose a problem, but I like the way that our offensive line would stack up. All right, so that's the end of the offense. To recap, the starters are Jay Cutler, Matt Forte, Jason McKee, Marshall and Jeffrey at receiver, Greg Olsen at tight end, Tate and Big Cat are your tackles, Kyle Long and Garza are your guards, Olin Kreutz is your center, And so far, defensively, we've got Peppers and Alex Brown, defensive ends, Harris and Big Ted Washington in the middle. You've got Briggs and Colvin as the outside backers. You've got Brian Urlacher in the middle. And now we come to the secondary. We know that Peanut Tillman is the
Peanut Tillman's the best corner the Bears have ever had. I mean, that's
Tillman's the best DB that the Bears have ever
best
had.
defensive back, yeah, without a doubt.
All right. And sorry, with apologies to Gary Fensick, but and maybe Richie Pettibone. So you got Peanut at corner, and you've got Mike Brown and Tony Parrish at safety. Although we did have some pushback with people saying Mark Carrier should start at safety instead of Parrish, but Carrier gets some of his best years clipped in this particular exercise because it starts in 1993. If you took Carrier's entire career and you get those 10 interceptions in 1990, it's a different story. Carrier's going to make this roster. So the question was, who is your number 2 corner? You got Peanut number 1. Who's your number 2 guy?
I think when you originally talked about the corner and the corners in the secondary, I was one of the people who voted for Tim Jennings. I think that acquisition by the Bears and reinvention of Jennings when he came over to Chicago in his late 20s was very glossed over because of how he was a second team All-Pro, I believe, in 2010 next to Peanut. So hold on, let me just double check this, not to say that out of the blue. So he fit very well in Lovie Smith's defense. He complemented Peanut's playing style. I mean, this was a guy for the first several years of his career who didn't reach that level of play. But then when he came to the Bears, I'm looking at it right now, he was a 2-time Pro Bowler. And yes, he was a second team All-Pro in 2012. And he led the NFL interceptions in 2012.
Oh, he was amazing.
So,
2012. And it was
so I mean, he did a lot. To me, that's good enough to be the second guy. I like Nathan Vasher. Nathan Vasher had a good 2005. Played well next to Peanut in 2006. Donald Wolford can't underrate him or can't understate him. But to me, Timmy and Peanut were the best the Bears have had as a corner duo, especially in the modern passing era.
I agree with that. I think that Vasher also in this hypothetical exercise, he's your best possible nickelback. And the plays that he made in 2004 at the nickel were game-changing plays. And again, you look at this hypothetical Packers team, and your nickelback is probably going to be Charles Woodson because they've got Leroy Butler and the rapist Darren Sharper, and then Eugene Robinson at safety. They've got Al Harris and Doug Evans. They kind of have weak corners. There are some holes in this Packers all-time team that we're looking at here. The same sort of 1992 to the present. There are some holes in this Green Bay team that don't impress me. So the
only real hole they don't have is obvious, but yeah.
What's that?
Quarterback.
Yeah, but you can only play one quarterback. And I was actually talking to some of my Packer fans' friends. Who would you start in this hypothetical thing? Would you start Favre or Rodgers? And they were a little uncertain, but they said one of my guy Packers Suck in my phone. He said that if he had to choose between the duo of Holmgren and Favre or the duo of McCarthy and Rodgers, he would take Holmgren and Favre. So again, I mean, one of the Packers' greatest strengths for this exercise is a weakness because you can't play two QBs. So we've got Peanut, we've got Tim Jennings, Nate Vasher in the nickel, Donnell Wolford is your number 4 guy, Mike Brown, Tony Parrish, Mark Carrier. Let's move on from them. I think we agree Robbie and Brad Maynard are your kickers. I mean,
Robbie's the Bears' all-time leading scorer.
Right.
He didn't get the best exit, but that's not really debatable as to him being maybe the best Bears kicker ever, too. A lot of these guys that we're noting, like post Ditka, are also the best to ever play for the Bears, and Robbie's one of them again, like Peanuts. So Brad Maynard, I think really underrated, too, considering with a lot of those Bears offenses, considering the amount of work he had.
The competition, though, at punter was like low-key fierce. It was Maynard, Gardaki, Podlish, and the big leg, what's his face, Sauerbrunn.
I wouldn't put Podlish up there. I would not put Podlish up there. I think
all right.
I think he's.
See, I knew him
in
the locker room. I liked him, so I sort of I try to be fair to.
Yeah, there's a little bias there. I know, but I'm saying based off of like I get you. But I wouldn't have him. Maynard's still far ahead, so I guess it doesn't matter. But
okay. Yeah. All right. So then special teams. So this is where then we got into another bit of a question. How many guys are worth their roster spot strictly for their special teams contributions? So obviously, Devin Hester, Manley is your long snapper. And then I said Brendan Nyambadejo, who changed he was a key guy who, Manley identified, who changed the attitude of the Bears special teams and made sort of like third and fourth tier linebackers or DBs on the depth chart realize that, no, you're not a backup corner. You're a starting special teamer. And I would put Corey Graham on that list as well.
Corey Graham too, underrated. Again, this is post Bears, but also a Super Bowl champion with the Ravens as a nickel corner special teamer. So he doesn't get enough credit to me. Ian Badejo, like you noted, I don't think Devin has that rookie season, that electric rookie season. I mean, that's not. I don't think this is that disputable without Ian Badejo as sort of like that lead special team guy. So yeah, you have to appreciate what he has. Okay.
Yeah, and you know who I don't have on, who I meant to have on this list, who I don't have on this list, are two special teamers who need to be considered. One is Larry Wiggum, who was a Pro Bowler with the Bears in 2001, and the other is Blake Costanzo, who was the replacement for Corey Graham, basically, when they weren't going to re-sign Graham. He went to Baltimore. We got Costanzo over from the 49ers. So the question is, like, when you've got linebackers and safety, when you've got like Hillenmeyer and Izzy Adonijay and Chris Harris potentially and Danielle Manning potentially, Mark Carrier. Imagine Mark Carrier on special teams.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, can you justify a roster spot for Larry Wiggum, for Jerry Azuma, for Blake Costanzo? I'm not sure. That's I don't know. I mean, another switch that I had that Lester wanted me to remove is that I had Chris Zorich. So we didn't fill out the defensive line depth chart. We have Peppers, Brown, Agunlier, and then the late Brian Robinson. And then Harris, Washington, Traylor, Adonijay. And then I had Chris Zorich. And Lester was like, nah, you don't need Chris Zorich isn't special enough as a ninth defensive lineman to negate, Zoom or Wiggum, somebody like that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, that was a mouthful. Go ahead again.
What are your thoughts on Chris Zorich, the old defensive tackle? Do you remember him?
I do not, and I feel awful for not.
All right, so Chris Zorich, again, another local guy out of Notre Dame, and dude, Bears fans loved him. So Zorich you'll see. All right, so when you go to Soldier Field, there are obvious jerseys that you're always going to see. You're always going to see Peyton. You're always going to see Singletary, Urlacher. Now you'll always see Tillman, Hester, Briggs. You'll always see whoever the quarterback is. You'll see whoever the running back is. And then there's guys like Dent, Hampton. You'll see Butler. You'll see somebody in a Stairs jersey, in a Butkus jersey. But then there are some cats who you'll see who, like, they weren't stars, but they were like Chicago stars. And Tom Waddle is one of them. Jim Flanagan is one of them. Chris Zorich, though, is the super duper one of them. In fact, when I was rewatching the Bears-Cardinals game from 2006, the comeback game, when I was rewatching that last fall when I was doing all my 2006 Bears stuff, a guy in a Chris Zorich jersey, and this game is in Arizona. You know what I'm saying? Like, a guy in a Chris Zorich jersey pops up. So he was number 97, Zorich. I don't know what else to say about him. Defensive tackle. He was another guy in that 94 team. But, I don't know that you need him over like a true special teams.
You don't take him. You don't take him unless that's the merit of debating a special teams guy versus a roster or depth roster player. I mean, that depth roster player has to be more impactful than a special teams ace. And to me, Chris Zorich probably isn't. So
we're gonna move Zorich down on my little spreadsheet here. And put some question marks, triple question marks next to his name. That's the indication that, you know what, might not be your day. But shout out to Chris Zorich. And now when you go to Soldier Field this year, you be on the lookout for the number 97 jerseys. And if you ask the wearer of that jersey how much they love Chris Zorich, get ready to get your face chewed off in enthusiasm, because man, did people love that guy. Zorich, Waddle, Zorich and Waddle kind of occupy similar space in Bears, like
Tom Waddle,
tough, right? Yeah, tough, like man of the people. Zorich, Flanagan, that's often code for white, but Zorich wasn't white, but I would definitely put him on that man of the people list. I mean, Peanut Tillman was going to be on that list until it turned out that he was amazing. It was kind of like how for a while, like Don Cheadle and Philip Seymour Hoffman were like that guy actors. And then it was like, oh, never mind. They're like fucking Oscar winners. My bad.
Right.
Don Cheadle never won an Oscar. He should have, though. But you get what I'm saying. So yeah, shout out to Chris Zorich, Tom Waddle, Jim Flanagan, Mike Wells, my man Dante Jones. Shout out to Mo Douglas and John Mangum. There are some other guys who I was considering as like safety specialists. Mo Douglas. I hope there's like older heads who are like, actually there's like real older heads who are WCG guys who are looking at me like, Mo Douglas, that young whippersnapper punk. Like, because I'm not even talking about, you know.
You're naming half these names you're naming. I mean, I don't like Chris Zorich. I don't even know who these. So you're on your soapbox right now.
You know what one of my favorite games is as a Bears fan is whose number is that?
Okay. Well, half of them are retired. Or
No, right. But if you say like a jersey number, like if you pick like a random one, like in the 70s or in the 40s, 50s, and you can see how old people are by who they think owns that jersey.
Okay. 14.
Brian Greasy.
Fair. 53.
Warwick Holdman, even though love to Dante Jones and Nick Roach. All right, keep it going. I like this game.
62. If you could get an offensive lineman.
Shit. 62. Why am I
gotta look at that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark Bortz. Never mind. Sorry, my bad.
I'm just gonna name random numbers. 31.
Nate Vasher.
That was an easy one. 25.
Tom Carter.
All right, let's make it the last one. 71.
I'm trying to draw out something. I mean, it's Izzy, but I was trying to draw out something a little different. Well, it's Big Cat too.
Big Cat also on that, yes.
Yeah, so Big Cat and Izzy, number 71. I mean, I've got some random ones. Like, I mean, they're beyond random. They're stupid. Like, we had a safety named Fan Merrill on the 2001 team, special teamer, and he was number 22. And for some reason, until Matt Forte, my number 22 Bear was Fan Merrill. I think I just liked that his name was Than, Than, and I'd never heard that before and haven't heard it since. But Fan Merrill, you know, number 22, good old Than. I got to stop. I could do this forever.
You really could. I could tell. Wait, so we didn't. I mean, the returner doesn't have really much debate. We didn't talk returner though, did we?
Well, it's Devin, and it's interesting because here's a position where there is no debate. It's obviously Hester, but the Bears since 1993, which is the time period we're talking about, the Bears have actually sent 4 returners to the Pro Bowl, which is the most of any team in the NFL. Hester, obviously, but Azuma, Johnny Knox, and Glenn Milbert.
Also, the most amount of scores, correct? I think you also referenced this.
I believe I did.
Most amount of kick return to punt return scores. Okay, yeah. So I mean, the Bears the Bears were blessed with Dave Taub for a while and blessed with some talented guys. I mean, you can't really debate that. Devin Hester's the greatest kick returner, punt returner of all time. I'm sitting here with the man who is who also will defend that to the death for his Hall of Fame case, obviously. To the death.
Actually, yeah. If you Google, well, it might just be because I'm signed in as myself, but if you Google Devin Hester Hall of Fame, the Windy City Gridiron story that I wrote about Devin Hester going to the Hall of Fame, called "Stop NFL Tokenism," is the first Google return. So everybody at Windy City Gridiron, everybody listening to this, you should hit Devin Hester Hall of Fame in Google. Let's drive those search results up. In fact, if you hit Charles Tillman Hall of Fame, I believe the same thing happens, that it brings up my story called Charles Tillman's Hall of Fame Problem, which Peanut himself said he was glad he read all the way to the end when there was actually good news, because the whole, first 70% of the story is the 5 reasons why Peanut won't get into the Hall of Fame because of biases in the voting process.
The message here is don't mess with Jack, guys, because he will create the best arguments. Hit those up. Hit those up. Okay, so let's jump to coaches now.
Yes.
Lovey isn't. I mean, this is another one that's not really debatable. Third most winning Bears coach of all time, 144 victories. He did have his obvious faults that never really brought the offense all together, but the defense, for the most part, kept the Bears afloat, made them a respectable team. 3 playoff appearances, a Super Bowl, an NFC Championship game. Yeah, I mean, you can't really knock Lovey too much. Lovey was also, you've noted this before, that father figure, that guy that commanded respect of the locker room, brought everybody together. He was just competent. I mean, that's probably the best compliment for Lovey, just a competent leader.
Yeah, and a guy who all of his players swear by and stand by, and
to this day, you'll still see stories about Lovey, about Brian and Lance defending Lovey.
Everybody, yep.
The Lovey curse the other week, from Brian. So, yeah. Where it was interesting was offensive coordinator, and to me, this isn't really much debate because I agree with the choice. Adam Gase brought out the best Jay Cutler to me that we've ever seen, even better than Pro Bowl alternate Jay Cutler. Let me state that for everybody when the Bears traded for Jay Cutler, when saying he was a Pro Bowl, he was a Pro Bowl alternate. The best season Jay Cutler's ever had was 2015 with Adam Gase, with his highest passer rating. Didn't turn the ball over much, played within himself, wasn't really surrounded by a lot of talent, and I was just impressed by what Gase was able to get out of him and get out of a less than able Bears offense. And it's really a shame that Gase. Well, I mean, you're not going to stop a guy from taking a job in Miami, but it's really a shame that we couldn't get year 2 of Gase with Jay. I mean, you see what would have happened last year.
You might stop a guy from taking a job in Miami if he's read the article, The Unhabitable Earth, which says that Miami is not even going to exist.
Circling back to global warming, yeah, Miami won't exist. I'm not sure if Gase will be coaching the Dolphins for that long, but she should consider it. He should have considered it.
Take a look, yeah, because this is going to be a little hot.
Bear down before the end of the world, guys.
Bear down before the end of the world.
Defensive coordinator Ron Rivera, another guy.
I'm sorry, it's New York. It's New York Magazine. It's New York Magazine.
Yeah, it was New York Magazine. I read that story today. I know what you're referencing. Guys, bear down before the end of the world. Defensive coordinator Ron Rivera, another guy that got away like Greg Golson. You've seen him have success with Carolina now as a head coach, taking him to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. I mean, the Bears were fantastic under Rivera during his year here. I mean, the 2005 and 2006. So you can't really debate that. I did like Rod Marinelli in the late Lovey years. I think you can't discount what he did to help them bring back to the playoffs. The mentality he instilled in them to work away from. He was the coach when the Lions went 0-16, so he kind of worked away from that reputation. He got back all of his respect back because of what he did with the Bears. Mm-hmm. So there's that note. Ron Rivera is again still above him, but Marinelli after that, and then Dave Taub on special teams. Many believe that he's probably the best this was the best special teams. He's with the Chiefs now. He's the best special teams coach in the modern era, or at least the last decade.
We had that story that he had turned the Bears into the best special teams unit in 30 years.
Yeah, that was off of his work. He might be a future coaching candidate, head coaching candidate, maybe for the Bears after this season. And I mean, it was his work, his schemes, his motivation, all of that turned them into such a powerhouse. I mean, these guys, for most of the coaching staff, probably other side than Gase, because on offense, there wasn't really much to choose from. Also, even though I appreciated what Gase did with Jay, these guys were undisputable. So I mean, I think we can agree with that.
Yeah, you know what? Originally, I voted for Ron Turner, because again, I respect tenure. I respect longevity. Ron Turner helped two different Bears teams excel offensively. So he had that first run in the 90s, and then obviously in the Super Bowl year. But I agree with everybody who said Adam Gase, and I've come around to that. So shout out to Adam Gase. Shout out to Gary Crowton, innovator, founder of the wide receiver bubble screen.
We miss Gase, though. We really do.
We do miss Gase. It sucks.
Okay, so that should just about wrap up the roster and the staff. Was there anything you wanted to ask or to cap this off of this extensive work you've done over the past few months, Jack?
No, man, this is fun. It's been really fun having readers chime in with their votes and vote in the polls that we've been putting up and debate everybody in the comments. And so right now, this is the roster that we have right now. I'll just read it off one by one, and this might change when we do the final, but this is what we've got right now. Cutler, Kramer, Grossman, Forte, Thomas Jones, Adrian Peterson, Jason McKee, Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, Marty Booker, Marcus Robinson, Rasheed Davis, possible speed receiver TBD. Olsen, Clark, Marty B, John Tate, Big Cat, Fred Miller, Andy Heck, Kyle Long, Roberto Garza, Ruben Brown, Olin Kreutz. That's the offense. Defense, Peppers, Brown, Wale, Brian Robinson, RIP, Tommy Harris, Ted Washington, Keith Traylor, Izzy Adonijay, Briggs, Colvin, Warwick Holdman, Urlacher, Hillenmeyer, Peanut, Tim Jennings, Nate Vash, Donnell Wolford, Mike Brown, Tony Parrish, Mark Carrier, Chris Harris. That's the D, and we're not sure yet about Pernell McPhee or Chris Zorich. Special teams, Robbie Gold, Brad Maynard, Devin Hester, Pat Manley, Brennan Iyambadejo, Corey Graham, and we're not sure about Zoom and Larry Wiggum and Costanzo, and if anybody else sneaks in there. Coaching staff, Lovey, Adam Gase, Ron Rivera, Dave Taub. We're going to have the entire team, though, not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. And this Wednesday, the starting fullback on the Windy City Gridiron All Bears post-Ditka team, Jason McKee. We've got an interview with him. That's coming up, and I'll give you a little teaser on the McKee interview. I asked him about the similarities and differences between Jay and Rex, because McKee, from my count, unless I miscounted, was one of only 6 guys to catch passes from both quarterbacks. And he said that the thing that stood out to him about Cutler's arrival was that prior to Jay, the team, although obviously the offensive players spend most of their time with the offensive players, the defensive players spend most of their time with the defensive players, but that prior to Jay, it was one team, regardless of if you were on offense or defense. And after Jay's arrival, coinciding with some key guys starting to leave, it became 2 teams. Something to think about. This just came to me, and I think aside from your teaser, this is a good way to cap it. Because I imagine for you, but I'm going to assume that years from now, however long, you will do this again, right? I'm going to guess. Yeah.
So, with that in mind, Give me some guys that you think or that you could envision that will make this roster. Just you decide on the number you want to say, and so let's say 5 years from now. Let's stick with that number, and you just pick the amount of guys you want to mention.
All right. I think that 5 years
starters or on the roster in general.
Okay, I think that 5 years from now, Cody Whitehair will be good enough that you'll want a backup center. Which right now we don't have really a backup center. We've got Roberto Garza, who could be a center. But I think 5 years from now, Cody Whitehair will be good enough that he'll be a backup center.
Okay.
I think that 5 years from now, Leonard Floyd will be good enough that, we've got 6 linebackers, but the 6th is McPhee, who we're kind of wavering on and may or may not end up making this team. I think that Floyd will end up being
probably your 3rd. I would say maybe even a starter.
Well, here's the thing. Rosie basically has 01 and 02 because 99 and 2000 he was good, but he wasn't starting really. I mean, he was sort of in and out of the lineup. Rosie has those great years, 11.5 sacks in 2001 and 11.5 sacks in 2002, and then he left via free agency. So Leonard Floyd, if he stays and produces how we all hope, and if your name is Robert Zielinski, how in your heart and soul he will perform.
I absolutely.
Yeah, you do. Then I think Leonard Floyd is definitely making this team. All right. I'll just say that Trubisky. I mean, listen, the number two quarterback position is in range.
Yeah, he might not necessarily pass Jay, but if he's adequate and not that turnover prone, I mean, he could be the backup 5 years from now.
Yep.
On at least, depending on how things go.
And then I'll just say that based just on running back, so we're really taking Adrian Peterson, who's a solid running back, but we're taking him because he was a great running back, and then also because he was a great special teamer. But if you just want to talk about who would be the best 3 running backs in the post-Ditka era in 5 years, I think Jordan Howard can absolutely be the number 3, or maybe even top Thomas Jones as the number 2. Again, Jones is a bad case because we shouldn't have traded him when we did, and so obviously his numbers would be totally different. But I think that you could say that Jordan Howard could end up in that 3 spot. And after that, I'm not willing to say anybody else.
Well, yeah. So you named the 3 gems of the 2016 Bears record,
and I mentioned Trubisky. So you got 4 guys basically.
Okay, so essentially the 4 core guys, which is what you hope for.
Trubisky, Howard, Whitehair, and Floyd. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll see how that plays out 5 years from now. Hopefully, there's a lot more success also to reference besides the talent we've had.
I love it. Hopefully, the Earth is
Hopefully, the Earth isn't just.
We're still able to
talk about
football, and hopefully we're not walking, outside basically wearing nothing because it's too hot.
We're going to have to bear down before the end of the world at some point. So
bear down before the end of the world. And shout out to John Boyce and his crazy sci-fi football story that isn't even finished yet, called 17776, or football, or the fucking future of football, whatever the hell it's called. That shit's a trip, and props for finding a way to utilize the written word, video, graphics, fucking Google Maps, all sorts of crazy shit. It's not for everybody, but it's pretty cool. And you know what? It's getting late because now I'm starting to curse like every 6 words. So I think that's it for me.
Jack's referencing SB Nation's creative director John Boyce's fantastic story. Check it out. It's called 17776. It's a trip. So that should just about cap this episode. Working off of Jack's latest post-Ditka roster, 2017. We'll see how the future plays out. Keep an eye out. Literally, in every facet, not just the Bears. Keep an eye out for his interview with post-Ditka fullback Jason McKee on Wednesday. And then tomorrow we'll be talking with Ryan from Pride of Detroit, Ryan Matthews, previewing the Lions and previewing training camp, the Bears offense before training camp. So this has been fun. This has been fun getting nostalgic with you, Jack, while we still can.
That's right. All right, so before we sign off, hit me with 3 final jersey numbers.
3, okay. 19.
Devin Aromashadu.
84.
Bobby Wade.
Ooh, okay. And then let's go. Ooh, I bet you can't get someone here. 48.
We had that cat Venable, but he was 49. Oh my God, 48. Did you stump me on 48?
I think I might have. Let's see.
Uh-oh, hold on. Shit. 48. I remember that, again, that dude, I think Wilson Venable, but he was number 49. Oh my God, who was our last number 48? All right, I could cheat, but I'm fully going to cop to this. I'm going to have to look this up.
I'm looking at Patrick Scales. Patrick Scales?
Patrick Scales.
I don't think
my goodness. Wait a second. Hold on. Who would be my 48? Because it wouldn't be Patrick Scales. Oh, no. Wait. Let's see here. We've got to love the internet. You know what? The internet is it's been a blessing and a curse for people with useless knowledge, because it used to be like I could be in a bar and people would say some shit and I'd be like, no, it's this. They would just have to take my word for it. And now I can be, it goes both ways. Now I can be proven right or proven wrong. Evan Rodriguez and JD Runnels were 48, as was, who was it on our staff who was like a major thing for Harvey Unga?
Is it Ken? Might be Ken.
I feel like it's not Ken. I feel like it's somebody younger.
Not me.
I don't know. Might be Sunder Brutch or Householder or Schweik. I just like saying these guys' last names. All right. Well, hey, shout out to number 48, JD Runnels, a fullback.
Yeah, I got you.
He's in the Jason McKee story. JD fucking Runnels out of Oklahoma. Out of Oklahoma. Yeah, that's right.
I think I stumped Jack pretty well, folks. I think
you came up with number 48, and I just got embarrassed here on National Windy City Gridiron Radio. Dude, I can't even talk anymore. I gotta go get to my familial responsibilities.
All right.
Thank you for having me. Shout out to Windy City Gridiron, Bears fans everywhere, and JD Runnels, number 48.
Follow Jack on Twitter at ReadJack, and then everything we noted, programming notes. Follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. Follow us as a site at Windy City Gridiron, at WC Gridiron on Twitter. And everyone, instead of staying classy, bear down before the end of the world.
Bear down before the end of the world. That's right.